Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Dear students, welcome to Insight Academy. In today's session, we're going to have a discussion of General Studies mains test paper of modern Indian history. I hope all of you have attempted the paper and all of you are doing good in your preparation so far. In this paper, the questions were from the Modern India segment, and Modern India is very important segment of GS because most of the questions here are coming repeatedly in GS paper 1, whether this is the topic of establishment of British rule or economic dimensions of British rule, or you say Indian national movement. All these topics are very important. Indian national movement is always the most important segment of modern history. Personalities, ideas, values, the movements organized by Indian leaders to fight against British rule, or the stages in the liberation of India from British rule, all those topics are very important. Let's start today's session. Evaluate how Lord Dalhousie Dalhousie's expansionist policies as Governor General reshaped India's political landscape. So think of Lord Dalhousie, one of the greatest imperialists in the history of British rule in India. And he was the Governor General from 1848 to 1856. So he was the person just before the revolt of 1857. Canning was the Governor General at the time of revolt of 1857. Dalhousie was his predecessor. Lord Dalhousie is famous in history for territorial expansion. He followed policy of expansion and he used different methods. For example, doctrine of lapse. So doctrine of lapse was used by him to annex a number of states or native states. For example, Satara, Jodhpur, Sambhalpur, Udaipur, Baghat, Jhansi, Nagpur, all these states were merged by him with British Indian Empire or British India by using doctrine of lapse. In this doctrine, if any native ruler died without leaving male heir, so if anybody was dying without leaving a male successor, that state was considered to have merged with British Indian Empire. So if somebody was dying without a son, without a successor, his state was automatically merged with British Indian Empire. That was doctrine of lapse. A number of states were annexed by him by using this doctrine. He also used the doctrine of war. Certain territories were annexed by him by using war. For example, Punjab was annexed by him through war in 1849, Second Anglo-Sikh War, and Lower Burma, also known as Pegu, was annexed by him through war in 1852. Awadh was annexed by him. The state of Awadh was annexed by him through doctrine of misgovernance. The British were controlling most of the things in native states. The British resident or the British representative staying in the capital of native ruler was interfering in administration. He was the main cause of maladministration, of misgovernance, but still the British held Nawab of Awadh, Wajid Ali Shah, responsible for this maladministration. Wajid Ali Shah was removed from his throne. He was exiled to Calcutta, and Awadh was merged with British Indian Empire in 1856. So these are the examples of annexations carried out by the gentleman, Lord Dalhousie. He is famous as an imperialist. He was a great imperialist. He carried out annexation by using the methods of peace as well as war. If you look at the map of India, Punjab was annexed by him. So you can say this much area was annexed by him. Jammu Kashmir was also part of Punjab that time. Some Indian side of Punjab. So this much area was annexed by him by using doctrine of war, 1849. Some areas of Himachal Pradesh, some areas of Western India, Satara, Jaipur, Sambalpur this side, Awadh, Jhansi. All these were annexed by him by using doctrine of lapse. Lower Burma, think of this part also here, this is Myanmar. So this portion was also merged by him with British Indian Empire by using doctrine of war. He was a great imperialist, and within 8 years of his tenure as the Governor General of India, so he was from 1848 to 1856, and within 8 years, almost 50% of territories was increased by him within 8 years. So whatever was built in last around 100 years, almost 50% of that was added by Lord Dalhousie within a short span of 80 years. That's why it is commented that he was the greatest imperialist, and the kind of expansion he carried out could have never been matched by a military campaign. So he changed the landscape completely by carrying out expansion, and give the examples, write the methods, focus on significance. Question number 2. Examine Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar's role in 19th century social reform movements. How did his initiatives influence the intellectual and moral trajectory of modern India? Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was a great intellectual of 19th century. He fought for social upliftment of Indians. He fought against social evils. So all kind of social evils, whether this is polytheism, polygamy, untouchability, child marriage. Even before that, widow remarriage prohibition. Widow remarriage was prohibited in 1829 through the efforts made by Raja Ram Mohan Roy and his associates. But Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar continued to popularize that idea of prohibition of sati, because law was made in 1829. Initially that was applied to the presidency of Bengal in 1829. In 1830 the prohibition of sati was extended to Bombay and Madras presidencies. But still, even after the enactment of the law, the problem did not disappear. So Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar also fought against the evil practice of sati. He had to make people accept that new law, that sati was an evil. So whether it was sati that had already been prohibited, child marriage, widow remarriage prohibition was his main issue. He fought against the prohibition of widow remarriage, or he fought for legalization of widow remarriage. It was his effort that persuaded Lord Dalhousie in 1856 to legalize widow remarriage. So Widow Remarriage Act was enacted in 1856 by the government of Lord Dalhousie, and main effort was made by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. He also fought against polytheism, polygamy, untouchability, practice of slavery, etc. All these social evils were condemned by him, were targeted by him. So this was his contribution. How did his initiative influence the intellectual and moral trajectory? He fought for social upliftment of Indians, gave them ideas, gave them vision, what they could expect, what was their right. He also fought for spreading Western education. He published a newspaper called Shom Prakash, and Shom Prakash was a nationalist newspaper. So he helped in a big way in the making of modern India by creating a strong ideological, social and cultural foundation for that. That's why he is one of the kind of makers of modern India, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Question number 3. Analyze the ways in which British colonial policies engineered economic subjugation of India. So economic subjugation of India was carried out or a subservient form of economy was established in India. A subservient form of economy was established in India by the British. What was subservient in it? That India should supply raw materials. So India was developed by them as a supplier of raw materials. And India was to work as a consumer of finished goods. So India was to consume finished goods, and Indian money was to flow into the British pockets. That is the kind of dependent form of colonial economy. So to achieve this objective, what did they do? Commercialization of agriculture was carried out. Cultivation of cash crops such as indigo, cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, even opium. All these cash crops were cultivated in India. Indian peasants were forced to grow cash crops. These cash crops were sent to Britain because they were raw materials for the British industries. Indian handicraft industry was systematically destroyed. So efforts were made to destroy Indian handicraft industry. How was this destroyed? By exploiting Indian craftsmen, by forcing them to sell their goods at a cheaper rate, by forcing them to reveal their trade secrets, by forcing them to cut their thumbs. So Indian handicraft industry was systematically destroyed. If you look at the other side, how was India transformed into a consumer? One-way free trade policy. Duty-free entry was allowed to British goods, and at the same time, high tariff barriers were enacted against the entry of Indian goods in British markets. European finance capital was allowed to enter India. Charter Act of 1833 allowed the entry of European finance capital. So this was invested in railways, in shipping, in ports, in insurance, so that the system of import of British manufactured goods and export of raw materials from India could be intensified. So all these steps were taken by British to develop a subservient or a dependent form of colonial economy in India. This you have to link with the character of British rule. Because anytime you have a question on impact of British rule, you have to write a paragraph about the character of British rule. British rule in India was colonial, was exploitative, was guided by British interest, and that's why they tried to develop the subservient form of economy by doing these things. So analyze one by one and then highlight its impact on Indian people. One small paragraph related to impact at the last. Question number 4. Discuss the core ideas and objectives that define moderate phase of Indian national movement. The first phase of Indian national movement, or first phase of Congress, from the period 1885, foundation of Congress, to 1905, is known as the moderate phase of national movement or moderate phase of Congress. Depending on the language of question, you have to write accordingly. If question is about Congress, write Congress. Question is about national movement, write the term national movement. Second point, write about the prominent leaders of nationalist movement during this age. So you have Gopal Krishna Gokhale, you have Firoz Shah Mehta, you have Dadabhai Nauroji, you have Badruddin Tayyabji, you have S.N. Banerjee, W.C. Banerjee. All these kind of leaders were part of moderate nationalism or moderate nationalist group. What were their ideas? Concessions and reforms. Moderates were in favor of concessions and reforms. They were in favor of gradual change. They believed that British rule was good, or they believed in the efficacy of British rule, they in fact supported British rule. They were under the impression that if British rule comes to an end in India, there would be a phase of anarchy. Gopal Krishna Gokhale said that if British rule comes to an end, suddenly India will get pushed into the dark age of medieval period. They were constitutionalist in their outlook, use of constitutional methods, petitions, prayers, memorandums. They were non-violent. So all these kind of features, all these kind of ideas which you study as a part of moderate nationalism or moderate phase of national movement, you have to write here one by one. Objectives and ideas you can write together, like what they wanted, or you can write separately what would their demand. Demand was Indianization of administration, simultaneous holding of civil service examination in India along with London, then reduction in military expenditure, increase in developmental expenditure, promotion of education, all these kind of things, direct election, adult suffrage, all these were the main demands of moderate nationalists. So you can write about ideas in one paragraph and objectives in another, or you can write together in a small kind of point format of answer by mixing the two. Question number 5, analyze the political, economic and global factors that compelled the British to alter their stance on colonial rule and concede independence. So question here is asking about the factors that forced British to leave India in 1947. What were the political factors? What were the economic factors? And what were the global factors? So by 1940s, Indian national struggle was at its peak. Indian national movement had gained immense strength, and it was almost impossible for the British to continue their rule in India any longer. And that's why they had to leave India in 1947. So what were the political factors? Let us see. A spread of nationalist awakening. Nationalist awakening had reached even the native states. Quit India movement was the first mass movement that was extended to native states along with British India. Growth of nationalist awakening among soldiers and civil servants. The civil servants came under the influence of nationalism during Quit India movement. They did not take strong actions against the nationalists when they were fighting against British rule during Quit India movement. The 1946 Royal Indian Naval Mutiny revealed that nationalism was no longer limited to civilian population. Even the soldiers were under the influence of nationalism. And that Aryan Mutiny of Feb 1946 was a clear indication that steel pillars on which British Indian Empire was resting had started crumbling. Then resistance of common masses to British rule. Quit India movement revealed that level of nationalism had attained revolutionary heights even among the masses. Parallel governments were established in Satara, Baliyan and Tamluk. Local leaders led the agitation during Quit India movement when main nationalist leaders were arrested. So all these factors convinced them return of more than 2 million Indian soldiers from the battlefronts of Second World War. So at a time when all these things were going on, more than 2 million, in fact more than 2.5 million Indian soldiers returned from the battlefronts of Second World War. In the presence of those battle-hardened millions of soldiers, it was practically impossible for British to maintain their hold over India purely through force. So they had to leave. What were the economic considerations? The British leadership, the section of British leadership was under the impression that if India was left at the earliest, then most of the British interest in India would remain safe. They were under the impression that Indian leaders would remain close to Britain if they leave India at the earliest. So they wanted to leave India at the earliest because they did not want that intensification of hostilities should take place between Indian leaders and the British leadership. Global factors, beginning of Cold War. Cold War started by the middle of 1946. Soviet Union was supporting the fight of colonies for independence, and the Soviet support to nationalist agitations throughout the world was helping in the spread of leftism or communism in colonies. So American leadership or US government forced the European colonial powers to grant liberty to their colonies to ensure that containment of communism was possible, or to ensure that Soviet influence was not increasing or was not extending in colonies. So all these factors combined together forced British leadership to leave India as soon as possible, and they decided to leave India in 1947. Question number 6. Examine the causes of Anglo-French rivalry in South India during mid-18th century. How did the decline of indigenous political powers create a fertile ground for this conflict? So we are talking about Carnatic Wars. Three Carnatic Wars were fought. 1746 to 1748, First Carnatic War. 1749 to 1754, Second Carnatic War. 1758 to 1763, Third Carnatic War. These Carnatic Wars were fought between French company and the English company. First and Third Carnatic Wars were having their roots in Europe. The First Carnatic War was a reflection of War of Austrian Succession, and Third Carnatic War was a reflection of 7 years war fought between Britain and France. So these European trading companies, they were just traders, and they could fight on Indian soil by using their military forces, because the local political powers, because the Indian political powers had declined. Hyderabad, Carnatic, Marathas, Mysore, Travancore, all these were the local powers. At the same time, Mughals were the central authority, or Mughal Empire had also degenerated. The Mughal central authority was no longer relevant or no longer effective. A situation of power vacuum was created by the decline of Indian powers. This decline was in the form of fragmentation. This decline was also in the form of degeneration of military systems. In the Battle of St. Thom, a 10,000 strong Indian army was defeated by a very, very small French force, and that revealed that a much smaller, less than 1/10 French army defeated more than 10,000 strong Indian force in the Battle of St. Thom. So that opened the eyes of Europeans that Indians were not having much impact. They had degenerated, their systems were not up to the mark. Political ambitions or clash of political ambitions, nobles are fighting with each other. The sons, like in Hyderabad, sons and cousins are fighting with each other for throne. In Mysore in 1760, Hyder Ali captured power by pushing away the Wadiyars. Marathas lost in Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. All these factors were contributing to the resurgence or emboldenment of European companies. The Second Carnatic War was the result of succession disputes in the states of Hyderabad and Carnatic. So in this dispute, the Europeans could interfere. This itself indicates the degeneration of Indian native or indigenous powers because they were seeking the help of European traders just to get the throne. It means Indians were not even strong enough to fight their issues on their own. So all these factors were responsible for Anglo-French rivalry in South India, and the most important factor among them was the decline of Indian powers. Because of decline of Indian powers, the Europeans got emboldened. They thought the ground is open for them to kind of display their political power, display their ambitions, and establish their rule in India. So write all these things here. Question number 7. Describe the events leading up to the Battle of Plassey and assess long-term significance in shaping India's colonial history. Battle of Plassey was fought on 23rd June 1757. The first thing that you need to see here, first event that was important in this battle or in the background of this battle was death of Ali Vardi Khan. Ali Vardi Khan was a capable ruler and he died in 1756. In April 1756, Ali Vardi Khan died. He was the last capable ruler of Bengal, or last capable Nawab of Bengal. He was succeeded by Siraj-ud-Dowla, and Siraj-ud-Dowla was a son of the daughter of Ali Vardi Khan. The sons of other daughters of Ali Vardi Khan, other daughters also started participating in the dispute. So he was challenged by Ghasiti Begum and her son Shaukat Jung. So Ali Vardi Khan maintained unity, maintained the strength of Bengal, and after his death, internal political conflict broke out in Bengal, and that paved the way for Battle of Plassey. The death of Ali Vardi Khan was taken advantage by English company. They carried out additional fortification of Calcutta and they started misusing the Dastaks. They also gave shelter to the rebels or the opponents of Siraj-ud-Dowla. This resulted in attack on Calcutta in June 1756, where a black hole incident happened. More than 100 or 123 Englishmen died in that black hole. A room of 15 by 18 was filled with 146 people, and when the doors opened next morning, only 23 survived. Treaty of Alinagar was signed in Feb 1757 by Clive with Siraj-ud-Dowla to get the Calcutta back, and then Clive could see the situation of Siraj-ud-Dowla, that how his court was full of conspirators, and he could align with them to challenge Nawab in the battlefield of Plassey on 23rd June 1757. So connect all these chain of events, assess its importance. The English company gained political influence in Bengal, and this political influence slowly got converted into political dominance. The company established its control over resources of Bengal. Like after Battle of Plassey, company got zamindari of 24 Pargana from Mir Jafar. Company got rupiah 1 crore from Mir Jafar. The officers like Clive got huge amount of bribe from Mir Jafar. In 1760, Mir Jafar was replaced with Mir Qasim. Company got Bardhaman, Midnapur, Chitgaon, and 50 lakh to fight wars in South. With these resources of Bengal, they could beat the French effectively in South India. They would also fight against Marathas and other powers in future, because any power that had resources of Bengal in its pocket was almost invincible. So resources of Bengal, or the resources gained by English company from Bengal, made it almost invincible in India and helped it in conquering other parts of India. So that is the importance of Battle of Plassey. resources and beginning of the rise of English company as a political power in India with the passage of time. Question number 8. Critically assess the consequences of British land revenue policies on peasantry and agricultural structures. So land revenue policies means a number of land revenue settlements were introduced by the company in India. What kind of settlements? Permanent settlement, that was introduced in 1793 by Cornwallis. Rayatwari settlement that was introduced in Madras Presidency by Thomas Munro in 1820. Mehlwari settlement that was introduced in parts of Bombay Presidency in 1822 by Mount Stuart Elphinstone, and later it was extended to NWP and other parts of India. What were the intentions behind the settlement? The only one purpose behind the settlement was to extract as much wealth as possible from India, because the company was a colonial entity. Company's only objective was to fill its coffers to exploit Indian resources for the benefit of Britain. What were the consequences for peasantry? Extreme exploitation of peasants. No surplus of any kind was left with peasants. Their land rights were taken away. For example, in permanent settlement, zamindars were declared as the owner of land, and with one stroke of pen, millions of Indian peasants were deprived of their land ownership rights. Peasants were transformed into landless tenant cultivators with one signature. No surplus of any kind was left, so poverty, hunger, and recurring famine were the consequences. Moneylenders and landlords became active in Rayatwari areas, in Mehlwari areas, and here also the consequences were like that of permanent settlement. No infrastructural development took place for Indian agriculture. Indian agricultural practices, the agrarian aristocracy, the traditional agrarian aristocracy was destroyed because the British tried to develop a new agrarian aristocracy. So the Indian ownership systems, Indian cultivation practices, Indian crops, commercialization was imposed on Indians. They were forced to grow cash crops in place of food crops. So Indian peasants and agriculture were badly ruined. Millions of lives were lost due to recurring famines. Poverty and destruction were the lasting consequences of these land revenue structures. So divide your answer into four pages or 4 parts here. Introduction, character of the company's rule, what were the examples, in which area, what are the features, and then consequences, so that you could analyze it properly. To what extent did the revolt of 1857 reflect a broad-based popular resistance against British rule? Assess whether it can be categorized as the first war of first national uprising. A revolt of 1857 was the greatest challenge faced by British in India till that time. What was the nature of resistance? So you have to see here discontent, character of British rule, link it with the exploitation of different segments of population, and so how discontent was widespread. This widespread discontent prepared a wide social base for revolt of 1857. Soldiers participated in this revolt in large number. Dispossessed landlords and native rulers, for example, Rani Lakshmibai, Nana Sahib, all these participated, or Hazrat Mahal of Awadh participated. They were dispossessed native rulers. Kumar Singh, a dispossessed landlord. More than 20,000 talukdars of Awadh were deprived of their talukdari or zamindari rights by Lord Dalhousie through the recommendations of Inam Commission. Thousands of them participated in this revolt. Peasants participated in large number. Throughout UP or Gangetic Valley, UP, Bihar, Central India, lakhs of peasants participated. In Awadh region, in Allahabad region, in Banaras area, thousands of peasants were hanged by the British. Then you have participation of women. Then you have participation of common artisans and craftsmen. So almost every section of Indian population participated except the Western educated middle class. The Western educated middle classes stayed away because of the backward-looking character of this revolt. The revolt was trying to turn the clock back to pre-British times. This is why it was a widespread or broad-based popular resistance, and British had to struggle for almost 2 years before the revolt could be completely suppressed. Was it a nationalist uprising? If we take the modern understanding or the present understanding of nationalism, we can say that such understanding of nationalism as we understand India as a nation was absent among the rebels. So in modern sense of nationalism, the revolt was not a nationalist revolt, because what was in their mind was the local form of nationalism. That time Jhansi was a nation to Lakshmibai, Awadh was nation to Hazrat Mahal. So nationalism in local sense was dominating, was guiding the activities of rebels. But India as a nation today, as we understand Indian boundaries, Indian concept, this India as a nation is very different from the India of pre-1947. If you say 1947 or before that, let's say the nation for which Mahatma Gandhi fought, for which Jawaharlal Nehru, Motilal Nehru, for which Subhash Chandra Bose or Sardar Bhagat Singh fought, that nation was having today's India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. But today, we don't consider Bangladesh and Pakistan as a part of our nation, though this was the nation for Bhagat Singh and Chandrasekhar Azad. So the idea of nation varies from time to time, because nation is a cultural entity, and this cultural entity is bounded by political limits. So what we have, the vision of nation today was very different in 1857. So that time we cannot say that it was nationalist in modern sense, but some elements of nationalism were clearly visible, because any fight against foreign rule is nationalist in character. The Indian rebels were fighting against the foreign rule of British company or British forces. That's why they were having elements of nationalism, though not nationalism of the type we understand today. The last question here, question number 10. Discuss the defining features of Indian national movement during Gandhian phase. So what are the features of Indian national movement during Gandhian phase? It was a radical or very aggressive in character, because Gandhiji demanded Purna Swaraj. It was Gandhiji who defined the meaning of Swaraj for the first time. And it was during Gandhian phase, Congress adopted the goal of Purna Swaraj at Lahore in December 1929. This was a mass movement. It was non-violent. It was pan-India in terms of its geographical spread. It was egalitarian because it was guided by the idea that all Indians are equal and every human being is equal actually. It was democratic because Gandhiji fought for creation of a democratic India. It was secular. This was a regulated movement because Gandhiji was guided by specific ideas and specific principles. Use of strategies of STS. STS means struggle, truce, struggle. And PCP, pressure, compromise, pressure. was an important feature. Gandhiji used to launch a mass movement to build pressure, or Gandhi used to launch a mass struggle to build pressure on British rule. And when movement was not producing the desired result even after continuation for many months, he used to enter into a truce or compromise so that Indians or Indian nationalists could have some rest to start their fight once again. The Gandhian national movement was essentially a satyagraha, or the fight for truth. National movement during Gandhian phase was essentially an ethical moral struggle, because Gandhiji always believed in use of right methods even to achieve the right objectives. This Gandhian movement was a multi-dimensional movement. It was having social, economic, cultural, all the dimensions. Gandhian movement was also characterized by the use of active phase and passive phase. So there were active phases and there were passive phases. In Gandhian movement, during active phase, mass agitation was organized. During passive phase, village reconstruction program was undertaken by Gandhiji. So these are the defining features of national movement during Gandhian phase. Second part, evaluate the significance of Mahatma Gandhi's leadership. Mahatma Gandhi gave new ideas and new approaches, satyagraha, ethical moral concerns, belief in the contribution of masses, belief in the capability of women. On his call, thousands of Indian women participated in anti-British struggles. Sarojini Naidu, Usha Mehta were some of the prominent examples. Hindu-Muslim unity was strengthened. Once Gandhian movement or national movement became a satyagraha, its victory was guaranteed. Because Gandhiji believed the British rule in India was an evil, and it was the duty of every Indian to fight against it, to rise against it, to participate in non-cooperation movement against British rule. So widening the social base, intensification of agitation by giving new methods, new objectives, Gandhiji built pressure on the British rule and forced them to grant independence to India in 1947. Without the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, many more Indian generations would have continued to suffer under British rule, and it would have been very, very difficult to come out of the bondages of British colonial rule. So this was the contribution of Gandhian movement or significance of Gandhian leadership. So, dear students, this was the discussion of today's test paper. I hope all of you have noted down the main points. Still, if you have any issue, feel free to contact me through teacher support, or you can see me here in our office. Keep working hard, keep doing better and better. All the best. God bless you.